first thing we see is this beautiful, perfectly preserved red caboose.
It's not every day scientists send an underwater drone chasing after a sunken train, but that's exactly what happened with Locomotive 3512. Buried in Canada's waters for over a century, this rusting giant was supposed to be just another relic of the past. Instead, when cameras finally cut through the murky depths, what they revealed sent a chill through the entire research team. Forget treasure chests. This discovery turned out to be something far stranger. The legend of Locomotive 3512. Before it became the centerpiece of one of Canada's strangest underwater discoveries, Locomotive 3512 was just another workhorse of the rails. Built in the early 20th century, it wasn't designed to be famous. It was designed to haul freight, carry passengers, and keep industry moving across a country whose identity was still being forged by steel tracks and steam whistles. But fate had other plans. According to local lore, Locomotive 3512 met its watery grave in the 1910s, when a railway transport gone wrong ended with several train cars and the engine itself plunging off a barge into the depths of one of Canada's Great Lakes. Some say it was Lake Superior, others whisper Lake Ontario. The records are fuzzy, and that fuzziness has only fueled the mythology. Whatever the case, the massive iron beast never resurfaced. Instead, it sat in the silt, corroding slowly. Its smokestack now home to strange marine life. Of course, no legend is complete without ghost stories. For decades, locals claimed the area near the wreck was cursed. Fishermen told tales of equipment failing mysteriously, or of eerie shapes rising beneath their boats. Divers who dared descend to the depths before advanced technology made it safer reported hearing sounds, clanks, hisses, or even what they swore were phantom whistles echoing through the water. The more rational explanation was that shifting currents and metallic stress in the wreckage made odd noises. But to the imagination, it was the ghost of Locomotive 3512, still screaming as it went down. For years, the wreck remained more rumor than fact. Yes, there were maps marking its supposed location, and yes, a handful of grainy sonar images hinted at its outline. But no one had ever gotten close enough to confirm the details until recently. The development of high-tech underwater drones changed the game. Suddenly, places once considered unreachable became accessible. Suddenly, the ghost train at the bottom of the lake wasn't just a legend. It was a target. That's where the Canadian scientists came in. Drawn by the mix of history and mystery, a research team finally decided to put the rumors to rest. On paper, the mission was simple. Document Locomotive 3512, study how industrial relics decay underwater, and maybe learn something new about the environmental impact of old wrecks. Off the record, though, everyone on the team wanted to see if the wild stories were true. Was this just rusty iron, or was there something more sinister waiting in the dark? The locals, of course, had opinions. Some warned the scientists to leave the wreck alone, saying disturbing it would bring bad luck. Others were excited, hoping the discovery might put their sleepy lakeside towns on the map. A few even joked about Netflix swooping in for the inevitable documentary series, The Ghost Train Beneath the Waves. What's fascinating about Locomotive 3512 is how quickly it became larger than life. Most sunken trains are just industrial accidents forgotten by history. This one, it turned into a folk tale, a campfire story, and finally, a scientific mission that would make headlines worldwide. When the drones finally descended, the scientists weren't just investigating a wreck. They were diving headfirst into a century of myth, mystery, and unease. And as the cameras cut through the murky blackness, revealing the unmistakable shape of an old steam engine rising from the silt, Everyone thought they knew what they'd find. But what they actually saw? That part of the story is far stranger. The mission begins. Enter the drones. Exploring a lake bottom isn't as simple as strapping on scuba gear and hoping for the best. The waters where Locomotive 3512 sank are cold, murky, and dangerously deep. Conditions that make human dives both risky and limited. That's why the Canadian research team brought in their secret weapons, state-of-the-art underwater drones. Now, when you hear drone, you might think of buzzing quadcopters filming weddings or chasing delivery trucks. But these weren't your average toys. These were sleek, torpedo-shaped machines loaded with high-definition cameras, sonar mapping systems, robotic arms, and enough onboard tech to make a gamer jealous. They could glide silently through the black water, withstand crushing pressure, and beam back live footage to the ship above. Think of them as remote-controlled submarines, except with way better Wi-Fi. The mission's official goal sounded dry enough. Survey the wreck of Locomotive 3512, document its condition, and assess the environmental impact of decaying steel and machinery on the lake's ecosystem. But if you sat in the control room as the scientists prepped the drones, you'd know the truth. Every single person on that ship was buzzing with curiosity. This wasn't just research, this was adventure. Before the launch, there was a ritual. The lead scientist gave a briefing, outlining safety protocols and technical specs. Then came the lighter side, jokes about ghost trains, bets on whether the whistle would still be intact, and one nervous laugh when someone said, "Just make sure the drone comes back up." It wasn't pure superstition. Drones had been lost before, swallowed by strong currents or tangled in wreckage. Sending one down was always a gamble. Finally, the hatch opened, and the first drone slipped into the lake with barely a ripple. On deck, everyone leaned toward the big screen where the live feed flickered on. At first, it was just murk, brown, shifting clouds of sediment that looked like static. Then the headlights kicked in, cutting beams through the darkness. Fish darted across the screen, startled by the intruder. As the drone descended, the water grew darker, colder. The sonar pinged softly, mapping the lakebed below. Scientists pointed at blips, tracing outlines on their monitors, trying to match them with known maps of the supposed wreck site. Excitement built with every passing meter. Then shadows, shapes in the gloom. Something massive loomed ahead, partially buried in silt. The operators slowed the drone, maneuvering it carefully. The cameras focused, zooming through swirling debris. And there it was, the unmistakable curve of a steel wheel. Half buried, but still defiant against a century of decay. Locomotive 3512, they'd found it. On deck, cheers erupted, but they were short-lived. The drone's lights revealed more than just wheels. The engine wasn't resting neatly on its side, as many had imagined. It was twisted, almost folded in on itself, like it had been crushed by some invisible force. Strange patterns lined the metal, not the usual smooth corrosion, but jagged streaks that made even the most experienced engineers frown. "Looks like it's been burned," one whispered, though fire underwater didn't make sense. Another suggested chemical reactions. A third stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the screen. The deeper the drone probed, the stranger it got. Cables twisted into unnatural knots. Pipes bent at angles that defied structural logic. And then, as the camera swung past the cab, something glinted. A reflection, too sharp to be just rust. The operators zoomed in, breath held. That's when the mood on deck shifted. The jokes stopped. The room went silent, save for the hum of electronics. Whatever the drone had captured wasn't supposed to be there. The mission had started as a search for history, but now the team realized they might have stumbled into something much bigger and much darker. First glimpses of the wreck. The first moments of seeing a wreck on camera are always strange. It's like watching a ghost materialize out of fog. 1 second the screen shows nothing but swirling debris, and the next, a hulking shadow begins to take shape. That's how Locomotive 3512 appeared, slowly, piece by piece, until the full outline of the engine emerged from the gloom. At first glance, it was breathtaking. The massive steel wheels were still there, half buried in the silt like sleeping giants. The boiler stretched across the screen, encrusted with barnacles and strange algae, a reminder that nature doesn't waste time reclaiming what humans abandon. Even the smokestack was visible, bent but intact, standing like a marker on an underwater grave. On deck, the scientists gasped. For years, they had studied grainy sonar scans and fuzzy photographs. Now, for the first time, they were face to face with the real thing. One researcher muttered, "It looks alive," and in a way, it did. The flickering lights from the drone made the algae shimmer, giving the impression of something breathing. But as the cameras drew closer, admiration gave way to unease. The locomotive didn't look like it had simply fallen in and settled gently on the bottom. Parts of it were twisted, warped. One of the wheels was bent inward at an unnatural angle, as though crushed by immense pressure. The side panels had deep gashes, long, jagged marks that looked more like claw scratches than corrosion. "Could currents do that?" one operator asked. The lead engineer shook her head. "Currents don't cut steel." It wasn't just the damage. The cab, where the train crew would have worked, was eerily intact, yet strangely empty. A chair, still bolted to the floor, had a twisted backrest, as if something had forced it in half. Loose wires hung like veins from the ceiling, swaying in the water. And then came the detail that silenced the room. A pile of shoes clustered near the cab doorway, preserved in the cold depths. Shoes that looked as if their owners had vanished mid-step. Of course, logic suggested those shoes could have fallen from crew luggage during the crash. But in the moment, with the drone's lights flickering and the silence of the control room pressing down, the sight was chilling. One of the younger scientists whispered, "It's like they walked out and never came back." No one corrected her. The deeper the drone went, the more the wreck revealed its secrets. Pipes curled like broken ribs. The front of the boiler showed a massive dent, inward-facing, as if something had rammed it. A patch of steel gleamed strangely, reflecting light in a way that didn't match the rest of the corroded body. The operators zoomed in, expecting perhaps polished metal. Instead, they found something fused to the surface, a smooth, almost glassy substance that looked like melted rock. That discovery sent murmurs across the deck. Fire? Underwater? The explanation didn't add up. Chemical analysis would be needed later, but right then, the only certainty was that something unusual had happened to Locomotive 3512, something no one could explain. As the drone pulled back for a wide shot, the wreck looked less like a machine and more like a tomb. It sat hunched in the gloom, surrounded by debris and mystery, waiting for someone to decipher its scars. For the scientists, the excitement of discovery was quickly being replaced by a gnawing feeling. Maybe they weren't supposed to be here. The lead operator, breaking the silence, muttered, "This isn't just a wreck, it's a message." And with that, the mission took a sharp turn. They had come looking for history. What they found instead felt like a warning. The terrifying discovery. At first, the wreck seemed like nothing more than a strange accident of history, a train misplaced in the deep. But as the drone pressed deeper into the shadows, the scientists realized they weren't just cataloging rusted metal. They were staring at something that didn't belong. It began with a flicker on the edge of the camera feed. At first, the operators thought it was interference, maybe a glitch from the drone's lights bouncing off sediment. But when they zoomed in, the flicker sharpened into a pattern, geometric lines etched into the side of the locomotive's boiler. Not scratches, not corrosion, symbols. The room fell silent. On the monitors, the shapes looked deliberate, angular, almost mathematical, carved into the steel like someone or something had branded the machine after it sank. One of the researchers muttered, "That's impossible. Steel doesn't just do that." Another tried to laugh it off, suggesting it was a trick of the light, but no one laughed with him. Then came the sound. The drone's hydrophones, designed to pick up vibrations, began feeding back faint noises. At first it was static, the kind of hiss you'd expect from deep water. But underneath the noise, there was a rhythm, a pulsing thump, not mechanical, not natural, a beat, steady as a drum. It didn't take long before someone whispered what they were all thinking. "It sounds like a heartbeat." The drone's cameras shifted toward the cab again, where the shoes lay in a silent cluster. This time, the feed caught movement. The pile stirred slightly, as though nudged by a current, but the water was calm. The operators froze, fingers hovering above the controls. Another nudge. Then one shoe slowly tipped, rolling across the floor of the wreck. On deck, several scientists recoiled from the screens. "Back it out," one demanded, his voice trembling. But the lead operator shook her head. "No, we need to see this." The drone edged closer, its lights sweeping across the cab. That's when the real shock came. In the corner, half buried in silt, something metallic gleamed. It wasn't part of the train. The object was spherical, perfectly smooth, with no signs of rust, despite decades underwater. When the cameras zoomed in, the surface reflected light, like polished obsidian. Worse, the strange etched symbols seen on the boiler were etched here too, clearer, sharper, unmistakable. For a moment, no one spoke. The idea that this object had been inside or near the locomotive when it sank was absurd, but there it was, embedded like a secret, waiting to be uncovered. The hydrophones pulsed again, louder now, synced perfectly with the drone's approach to the sphere. The rhythm quickened. One scientist ripped off her headset, shaking her head violently. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" But curiosity won. The operator steadied the drone and extended its robotic arm, reaching toward the object. The claw hovered just inches above the surface, and then every monitor on deck went black. Panic erupted. The drone feed was gone. The sonar cut, the comms dead. For a full 30 seconds, the control room was nothing but chaos. Scientists shouting, technicians hammering at keyboards, the captain barking orders. Then, just as suddenly, the feed snapped back. The drone was still there. The object was gone. In its place, the cab looked emptier, darker, as if the shadows themselves had thickened. The heartbeat noise had stopped. All that remained was silence. The team stared in disbelief. Some swore it must have been a malfunction, an equipment glitch. Others sat pale and silent, unwilling to rationalize what they had just seen. Whatever it was, they knew one thing for certain. Locomotive 3512 wasn't just a wreck. It was hiding something, and they had just scratched the surface. And if you think the footage was bizarre, wait until you hear the theories it unleashed. Theories and speculations. The footage of Locomotive 3512 should have been the kind of thing that gets filed neatly under historical curiosity. A lost steam engine, a remarkable preservation case, maybe a museum exhibit in the making. Instead, what the Canadian scientists captured triggered a flood of speculation so wild it blurred the line between science, folklore, and outright conspiracy. Everyone seemed to see something different in those eerie images, and everyone had a theory. Let's start with the scientists, the people who were supposed to bring reason to the table. Their first explanation was almost disappointingly rational. The lake's unique chemistry had slowed the corrosion. The unusually cold, mineral-rich water created a kind of protective layer around the metal, keeping it from rusting away like most wrecks. Okay, plausible. But what about the odd markings that looked too deliberate to be natural? Here, even experts started scratching their heads. Some floated the idea of manganese oxide deposits forming in symmetrical streaks. Others suggested the patterns were caused by invasive freshwater organisms feeding in unusual formations. Reasonable, sure, but let's be honest, nobody was buying that when the markings looked like glowing glyphs carved straight into the iron. And then the conspiracies began. Online forums exploded within days. One popular thread argued that the Locomotive had been carrying experimental technology when it derailed back in 1901, something the Canadian Pacific Railway didn't want the public to know. According to this theory, the shiny metallic object wedged in the cowcatcher wasn't debris at all, but a prototype power source, maybe even a primitive version of a nuclear device. The government, they claimed, had known about it for decades, but lacked the technology to retrieve it until drones made it possible. Convenient, right? Others took it further into X-Files territory. They latched onto the fact that the feed had distorted right when the drone zoomed in on the strange patterns. Was it electromagnetic interference from the object? Was it broadcasting a signal? One particularly viral post insisted the train had collided not with a rock slide, but with something that fell from the sky. Yes, an alien craft. The Locomotive, according to this theory, didn't just derail, it was pulled under. Folklore lovers had their own spin. In British Columbia, lakes and rivers are often the stage for ghost stories, and this wreck became the perfect canvas. Locals dredged up the legend of the Iron Ghost, a phantom train said to rumble through the valley on stormy nights. Some claimed the wreck was cursed because the engineer, desperate to make up for lost time, ignored warnings and barreled into the mountain. His spirit, they whispered, was still sitting at the controls underwater, glaring at anyone who dared disturb his final resting place. The glowing streaks? Proof, they said, that the train wasn't just rusting, it was haunted. Even mainstream commentators couldn't resist weighing in. A historian half-jokingly suggested the markings were graffiti from another dimension. A popular science magazine ran a headline calling the wreck a time capsule with teeth. Meanwhile, YouTube filled with videos claiming to slow down the drone footage and reveal faces in the windows. Of course, pareidolia, the human brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist, explains it. But that didn't stop millions from hitting replay. And here's the thing, the more people speculated, the more the mystery grew. Each theory added fuel to the fire. Scientists who tried to tamp down the hysteria ended up looking suspicious, which only emboldened the conspiracists. The folklore crowd doubled down with tales of train whistles heard at midnight near the lake. And the alien enthusiasts? They were already mapping supposed UFO sightings in the area, tying them directly to 3512. At some point, the question stopped being what happened to Locomotive 3512 and shifted into what did scientists awaken by poking around down there? Whether you believed in chemistry, curses, or cover-ups, one thing was undeniable. The wreck wasn't just a relic anymore. It had become a living, breathing mystery, one that terrified some, thrilled others, and left everyone with the same uneasy feeling. Maybe it was better left untouched. Should we leave it alone? Once the initial shock of the drone footage wore off, a new argument broke out, one that had less to do with science and more to do with ethics, history, and maybe a pinch of superstition. Should Locomotive 3512 remain at the bottom of the lake, undisturbed, or should we keep poking around? On one side were the preservationists, the Leave It Be crowd. To them, the Locomotive was more than a hunk of iron. It was a grave, a sealed chapter of history. Tampering with it risked not only damaging the site, but also desecrating what some locals considered sacred ground. You don't go digging up cemeteries just because you're curious, one historian remarked. And besides, who knows what tinkering with a century-old wreck could unleash? From environmental hazards to supernatural ones, depending on who you asked, disturbing the peace of 3512 seemed reckless at best, arrogant at worst. The safety argument only added weight. What if the mysterious metallic object carried toxins or unstable chemicals? What if the markings weren't just pretty patterns, but a sign of corrosion, releasing dangerous compounds into the lake? And of course, the more superstitious voices whispered, what if disturbing it angers whatever's been lying dormant down there? You laugh until you hear enough ghost stories about phantom whistles and glowing streaks beneath the water. But then came the adventurers, the explorers, the poke it with a stick and see what happens team. Their case was simple. How could humanity not investigate? Here was a perfectly preserved time capsule from 1901, a rare chance to study industrial history up close. Beyond the folklore and conspiracies, there were genuine scientific questions to answer. Why did it preserve so well? Could it teach us about metallurgy, engineering, or even climate science? And, of course, there was the shiny, unidentifiable object that practically begged to be studied. Supporters of exploration often threw in a little humor to soften their stance. One viral tweet summed it up best. If Scooby-Doo taught us anything, it's that you always go back to investigate. That playful jab hit a serious point. Every great discovery in history has come from someone who ignored warnings and pressed forward. Had we listened to the leave it alone crowd, half of modern archaeology wouldn't exist. Still, the debate raged on, fueled by equal parts science, fear, and storytelling. One camp warned of hubris and haunting. The other promised breakthroughs and adventure. And in between were ordinary people caught between goosebumps and curiosity, watching grainy drone clips on YouTube and wondering, if you had the chance to shine a light on the secrets of Locomotive 3512, would you take it? Before it became a mystery wrapped in glowing streaks and conspiracy theories, 3512 was just a machine with a job to do. Locomotive 3512, place in history. Before it became the centerpiece of eerie drone footage and late-night conspiracy theories, Locomotive 3512 was simply a machine built for work. A product of the Canadian Pacific Railway's ambitious expansion in the late 19th century, it represented the spirit of an era, industrial power, national growth, and the unstoppable march of iron across North America. Locomotive 3512 was part of a fleet designed to tackle Canada's rugged terrain. Heavy, durable, and equipped with the steam technology of its time, it wasn't flashy. It was dependable. Its task was straightforward: haul freight and passengers through mountain passes, across lake shores, and into towns that relied on the railway for survival. In an age before highways and airplanes, engines like 3512 weren't just trains. They were lifelines. Its final journey, though, was anything but routine. On June 23, 1901, while hauling cars along the mountainous route in British Columbia, disaster struck. Accounts vary slightly, but most agree that heavy rainfall had weakened the tracks along a steep stretch near Kootenay Lake. The train, unable to slow in time, derailed. Locomotive 3512 and several cars plunged off the tracks and into the dark waters below. Some crew members survived, others weren't as lucky. The engine itself sank into the depths, swallowed by silt and silence. For decades, the wreck was little more than a footnote in railway history. Newspapers at the time covered the accident briefly before moving on, chalking it up to the risks of frontier transportation. But for locals, the story stuck. A train lost to the lake became the stuff of whispers, especially because 3512 was never recovered. Unlike other derailments where engines were hauled back up, repaired, or scrapped, this one remained hidden, untouched, like a ghost frozen in time. Why does it matter today? Because 3512 is more than an old machine. It's a tangible link to a transformative moment in Canadian history. The railway wasn't just about commerce, it was about identity. It stitched the vast, sprawling country together. Every locomotive that ran those lines was part of a bigger story about resilience, connection, and human ambition. Finding 3,512 isn't just about a cool wreck on the lakebed. It's about seeing, in iron and steel, the struggles and triumphs of that age. And Locomotive 3512 isn't alone in this category. Around the world, industrial relics lie hidden underwater, each carrying its own eerie charm. In Wisconsin's Lake Superior, for example, several train cars still rest on the bottom after plunging off docks during early shipping experiments. In Scotland, sunken locomotives sit preserved in harbors, reminders of wartime losses. Even in Canada itself, other engines have met watery graves, but few are as intact or as mysterious as 3512. These relics matter because they're industrial fossils. Just as paleontologists study bones, historians study iron and steel to understand how humans built, traveled, and sometimes failed. Yet 3,512 stands apart because of the way it's been reintroduced to the world. Most wrecks are uncovered with little fanfare, documented, logged, and stored in archives. But this one, thanks to drones, the internet, and a taste for the eerie, it's become more than a historical artifact. It's a legend. The line between fact and folklore blurs every time someone shares a grainy screenshot of those supposed glowing markings. So, while Locomotive 3512 is firmly a part of Canada's industrial past, it has also transcended history. It now belongs to that strange category of objects that are both real and myth, both relic and riddle. It's not just a sunken train, it's a reminder that sometimes history refuses to stay buried quietly at the bottom of a lake. The classified files. As Locomotive 3512 captured the imagination of the world, an unexpected silence emerged from Canadian authorities. Requests for further dives were met with delays. Archive searches for original reports on the 1901 derailment produced frustratingly sparse results. Some files were missing, others marked restricted, officially for preservation and safety reasons. This only fueled speculation. What exactly was aboard 3512 when it sank? Was the metallic object spotted by the drone just industrial debris, or had it been something far more sensitive, experimental machinery, valuable materials, or even early technological prototypes? Scholars and hobbyists alike pored over every scrap of information, comparing government memos with sonar maps, looking for discrepancies. Whether it was a cover-up or genuine caution, the effect was the same. The wreck became not just a historical relic, but a portal into secrecy. And as the public wondered what the officials weren't saying, Locomotive 3512 transformed once again into a story where history, mystery, and hidden agendas collided beneath the waves. Your comments are welcome in the section below. For more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to this channel.